Subscribe because it's free.
They arrived in silence, their ships blotting out the stars over Mars. The Carthuan had conquered hundreds of worlds, but never had they found a species so unaware of its place. Their empire had watched Earth from afar, monitoring its broadcasts, its wars, its conflicts. Primitive, divided, and most of all, unprepared. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would kneel, as every other lesser species had before them. No need for diplomacy, no need for negotiation. This was not a first contact. This was an announcement. The Carthuan did not ask permission. They took what they wanted. 3 dreadnoughts emerged from a void, each the size of a small moon, their hulls layered in pulse cannons, kinetic shields, and gravity anchors capable of ripping entire fleets from warp. A single one of these ships had razed a Varanii homeworld to dust. 3 was not show of force. It was mercy. The message was sent, translated into every language humanity had ever spoken. We are the Carthuan. You will comply. They expected immediate submission. Instead, they were met with silence. Strange. Lesser races usually scramble to answer, desperate to beg or barter for survival. The Carthuan fleet commander, Grand Strategist Luthen, narrowed his eyes. Perhaps humans were slower to process fear. He signaled for a follow-up transmission, a planet-wide declaration. You do not understand your position. We will not ask again. Again, nothing. No response. No frantic distress calls. No desperate pleas. Just an empty, indifferent quiet. Luthen exhaled through his gills. This was a waste of time. He ordered the first demonstration, a low-orbit kinetic bombardment over Earth's northern hemisphere. The shot wasn't meant to cause real destruction, just enough to show their capabilities, to shatter any illusions of resistance. A brilliant beam lands downward, tearing through the sky. The energy burst erupted in the atmosphere, lighting up the clouds in a blinding fireball visible from every corner of the planet. It was a warning. Now, surely, humanity would understand, but still silence. Then something moved, not on Earth, but in space. Luthen's sensors registered a single vessel approaching from the far side of the moon. It was small, barely a speck compared to the dreadnoughts. A scout ship, perhaps? Or a diplomatic envoy finally coming to surrender. His officers sneered. The Carthuan fleet had obliterated entire armadas. What could a lone vessel possibly achieve? The ship slowed, positioning itself just beyond the reach of their gravity anchors. Then a transmission came through. Not a plea, not a surrender. Just 5 words, spoken in flawless Carthunic. You have trespassed. You are warned. Luthen laughed. The officers on his bridge exchanged glances, some chuckling at the sheer absurdity of the message. A primitive race, with no interstellar fleet warning them? One of his tacticians smirked. Shall I disable their vessel? Luthen waved him off. No, let them talk. They amuse me. He activated the comms. His voice, deep and laced with amusement, carried across the void. You are mistaken. We are not here to negotiate. The human ship did not respond. It simply hovered there, unmoving, as if waiting for something. Luthen leaned back in his command chair. We will show them. He gestured, and the gunnery officer primed another orbital bombardment. This one would be closer enough for them to understand the weight of defying the Carthuan. As the weapon began to charge, another sensor alarm sounded. Luthen frowned. More human ships had appeared. Not 1, not 10, dozens. They emerged from the shadow of the moon, from dark orbits around Mars, from hidden stations in the asteroid belt. A fleet, materializing out of nowhere, positioning itself with unsettling precision. Luthen's amusement faded. This wasn't panic. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated. The realization was unsettling. Humans had not been ignoring them. They had been waiting. A second message came through. You should have listened. And then, before Luthen could process the implications, humanity opened fire. Luthen barely had time to react before the first impact struck. The Carthuan fleet shuddered as unseen weapons tore through the void, slamming into their shields with kinetic force unlike anything they had encountered before. No energy beams, no plasma bursts, Just raw, brutal physics. High-velocity projectiles moving too fast for their defensive systems to react. The first dreadnought took a direct hit to its forward hull. The impact sent a ripple of energy across its shields, overloading them in an instant. A second later, another round punched through the weakened barrier, slamming into the ship's armor plating. The metal screamed as it twisted and shattered, entire sections of the dreadnought crumbling into the abyss. Luthen's command deck exploded into chaos. Officers scrambled, their displays flooded with damage reports. This wasn't possible. No species had ever resisted the Carthuan like this. Where are their energy signatures? What weapons are they using? Luthen barked. One of his tacticians, voice shaking, replied. They're using, he hesitated, as if the words were absurd. Kinetics, grand strategist. Hyper-accelerated slugs. No energy output, just impact. Luthen's mind reeled. Energy-based shields, the pride of the Carthuan fleet, were designed to absorb plasma, deflect laser fire, neutralize electromagnetic pulses. But these weapons ignored shielding entirely. They simply hit. A new alarm blared. Another human salvo was incoming. Dozens of projectiles, each precisely calculated, curving through space like they had minds of their own. Brace, someone shouted. The second dreadnought took a catastrophic hit. One of the incoming rounds struck an exposed reactor conduit, triggering a detonation that sent fire and debris spilling into the void. The ship lurched violently, its engines sputtering. Fires raged across its decks as hull plating peeled away, revealing its vulnerable interior. For the first time in his career, Luthen felt something he had never known before. Fear. How are they coordinating like this? He demanded. What fleet doctrine are they using? Silence. No one had an answer, because there was no doctrine, no predictable formations, no patterns to analyze. The humans fought like nothing the Carthuan had ever seen. They didn't form battle lines. They didn't engage in measured, strategic exchanges of fire. They struck and vanished, their ships weaving through the chaos like phantoms, attacking from angles that made no sense. A Carthuan officer shouted, "One of their ships is coming straight at us." Luthen turned just in time to see it. A small, heavily armored human destroyer accelerating directly toward the flagship, ignoring all logic, all common sense. No species engaged like this. No one willingly threw themselves into the fire. And yet, this vessel was. It fired mid-charge, releasing a barrage of hypervelocity rounds before peeling away at the last possible second, narrowly avoiding a direct collision. The rounds found their mark. The Carthuan flagship's starboard batteries detonated in a cascade of secondary explosions. "They're insane," one of Luthen's officers whispered. No, Luthen realized. They were something far worse. They were hunters. He could see it now, the way human ships moved. They weren't following military protocols. They weren't acting like a lesser species, facing a superior force. They were circling, testing weaknesses, isolating targets, just like predators. Luthen clenched his fists. This was unacceptable. The Carthuan did not lose. "Full retaliation," he bellowed. "Target everything. Burn them from the stars." The remaining Carthuan vessels unleashed their full arsenal: high-energy plasma bursts, graviton torpedoes, disruptor waves. Space itself seemed to burn as they fired in all directions. But it was already too late. The humans had anticipated it. Their ships broke formation before the counterattack even began, moving just outside the lethal range. They darted away like ghosts, regrouping for another strike. Luthen stared at the carnage, his mind struggling to grasp the truth. For the first time in history, the Carthuan weren't the ones dictating the battle. They were reacting, and they were losing. The Carthuan fleet was breaking. Luthen refused to accept it, but the battlefield told a different story. The first dreadnought was gone, torn apart by relentless kinetic fire. The second was crippled, its engines flickering as it struggled to hold formation. The flagship, his ship, had lost half its weapons. This wasn't just a battle. It was a slaughter, and the humans, they weren't slowing down. Another enemy vessel emerged from the darkness, cutting through the wreckage like a shadow. Unlike the others, this one didn't broadcast its presence. It didn't appear on standard sensor sweeps. It was invisible to their scans, detectable only when it was already too late. Luthen's heart sank. Stealth technology on this scale? Impossible. And yet there it was. The human warship glided past the remnants of a Carthuan cruiser, moving with eerie precision. Then, without warning, it fired. Railgun slugs had struck with pinpoint accuracy, severing the crippled ship's reactors in a single, calculated shot. The cruiser erupted in a silent explosion, its debris scattering like dust. Luthen gritted his teeth. This was no random attack. This ship, the Erebus-class destroyer, as his intelligence officers had frantically named it, wasn't fighting to overwhelm. It was hunting. Panic spread through the remaining Carthuan forces. The chain of command had collapsed. Captains screamed over the comms, demanding reinforcements that would never come. Some ships attempted to flee, pushing their engines to maximum output. But the humans were faster. One fleeing frigate barely made it 100 kilometers before railgun fire shredded its thrusters. The ship tumbled powerless before a follow-up strike snapped its hull in half. "Pull back!" one of Luthen's officers gasped. "We need to regroup." Luthen ignored him. This wasn't over. Not yet. He forced himself to analyze, to think. He was Carthuan. He was bred for strategy, trained in war since his first breath. There had to be a flaw, a weakness. Then he saw it. Humanity's strength wasn't just in their weapons. It was in their unpredictability, their refusal to fight the way other species did. The Carthuan had always won because their enemies played by the same rules. Humans rewrote the rules. That meant they weren't perfect. They couldn't be. There had to be a pattern. He scanned the battle, seeking any sign of weakness, any gap in their strategy. And then, there, the Erebus-class destroyer had fired again, but something was different. A delay, a gap between shots longer than before, a recharge period. Luthen's eyes widened. That was it. Their stealth ships couldn't fire continuously. They had limits. He slammed his fist against his console. Target the stealth vessel. All batteries now. The flagship's remaining guns swiveled, locking onto the dark silhouette of the human destroyer. Plasma bursts lit up the void, energy beams carving through space toward the unseen enemy. For a moment, he thought he had it, but then the human ship disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged. It simply vanished. A second later, new warnings flooded the flagship's displays. Incoming projectiles detected. Luthen barely had time to react before the world around him exploded. The flagship convulsed as kinetic rounds tore through its hull. The bridge lights flickered, emergency sirens howling as entire sections of the ship were ripped open to the void. The next shot struck the reactor bay. Luthen felt the impact in his bones. The deck beneath him cracked, the air filled with the acrid scent of burning metal. His vision blurred as gravity fluctuated, the ship's artificial systems failing one by one. Sparks rained from shattered consoles. Officers screamed, some thrown into walls, others swallowed by the rupturing hull. The mighty Carthuan flagship, his ship, was dying. He struggled to his feet, hands gripping the edges of his command chair. His body ached. His vision swam. But even through the chaos, one truth burned in his mind. They had lost. Luthen had fought in dozens of campaigns. He had stood on the ruins of conquered worlds, watched the civilization surrender beneath the weight of Carthuan might. And now here he was, his empire's greatest fleet shattered, his invincible armada reduced to drifting wreckage. The humans had done this, not with superior numbers, not with overwhelming power, with strategy, with ruthlessness, with a kind of war the galaxy had never seen before. His ship's main displays flickered one last time. A new transmission was coming through, not from his fleet, from them, the humans. The message was simple. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. Then silence. And beyond that silence, only darkness. Luthen drifted in the wreckage of his once mighty flagship. His command deck was gone, ripped apart in the last barrage. Emergency containment fields struggled to hold back the void, flickering and failing one by one. The ship was dying. No, not just the ship. The Carthuan themselves. This was more than a battle lost. It was the unraveling of an empire. Luthen's mind raced as he activated his emergency communicator. There had to be survivors. Some of his fleet must have escaped. Static. He checked again, his claws tightening. A handful of distress signals flickered across his display. Damaged warships. Scattered. Disorganized. None of them responding with fleet-wide commands. That meant one thing. The chain of command was gone. Luthen, grand strategist of the Carthuan Empire, was now the highest-ranking officer left in the void. And he was powerless. A deep, cold realization settled into his bones. This was what the lesser races had felt when the Carthuan arrived on their worlds. This was what they had experienced, watching an unstoppable force descend upon them, knowing there was nothing they could do to fight back. But the humans had fought back. No, the humans had hunted them down. His eyes flicked to the battlefield. The wreckage stretched for miles, drifting in orbit above Mars. Burning fragments of once invincible warships tumbled through the void, silent and lifeless. And the human ships? Still there, still moving. Not finishing off survivors, not gloating, just waiting. Why? Then a new transmission came through. Not a demand, not a surrender, a warning. This is your only chance. Run. Luthen's blood turned to ice. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to call it a bluff. But deep down, he knew the truth. The humans weren't asking them to leave. They were giving them a final opportunity, a mercy that the Carthuan had never offered to their own victims. And Luthen understood why. Because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. If the Carthuan Empire had been watching humanity, then humanity had been watching them too, learning, adapting, preparing. This battle had been intentional. They had allowed the Carthuan to think they were weak. They had waited for the right moment to strike. They had tested their weapons, refining their tactics, ensuring that when the time came, when the first real war began, there would be no second chance. Luthen looked at the wreckage of his empire's greatest fleet. The war had not been lost today. It had been lost years ago, the moment the Carthuan decided humanity was beneath them. He clenched his jaw, forcing down the burning humiliation. He had one choice left. Survive. He sent the order, a recall command to the remaining Carthuan vessels. Fall back. Those who could still move, run. Those who couldn't, they were already dead. Engines roared to life. The last remnants of the once great invasion fleet turned and fled, limping into the void, vanishing into the darkness of space. The humans did not pursue. They didn't have to. They had already won. As his escape pod launched into the abyss, Luthen stared at the planet below. Earth. It looked so small from here. And yet, it had just shattered an empire. Luthen forced himself to remember every detail, every tactic, every moment of this failure. Because there was only one thing left for the Carthuan to do. To warn the others. To tell the galaxy the terrifying truth. Humanity was not prey. They were not weak. They were the monsters in the dark. And they had only just begun to rise.